Welcome to the Sisterhood of Sweat. Today's guest is Travis Chappell. Travis Chappell is a podcast consultant and a professional connector. He is the founder of World Class Media, a full-stacked podcast production company specializing in helping busy entrepreneurs produce world-class podcasts that pay. In addition to being featured in Entrepreneur, NASDAQ, and Read Write, Travis has also been featured in Forbes as a top 10 podcast that will change your life, alongside of Joe Rogan, Gary Vaynerchuk, Tim Ferriss, and 6 other awesome podcasters. He is the creator and host of both World Class, a podcast that reverse engineers what it takes to be world class at what you do and build your network. A top 25 business podcast dedicated to helping entrepreneurs cultivate genuine relationships the right way. You can find him at travischappell.com. I was so pleasantly surprised at PodFest in Orlando a couple weeks ago. We just squeaked under the radar to make that trip to Florida before all this craziness with the coronavirus went down. But I was just pleasantly surprised. Many times when I go to these events, there's always a treat. There's always someone I've never heard of before, or I've never listened to them speak. And I love it when they win me over, and I'm a fan for life. So I really loved Travis Chappell at the PodFest. He had a great keynote, and I'm so fortunate today to have him on the podcast. We talked about building your network and how to go about that and how not to go about that. We also talked about podcasting, which is near and dear to my heart, because I feel like it is an engine of helping others, especially now, right now. Oh my gosh, I'm so glad that we can all still connect because of podcasting, because of the internet. We talked a lot about how to create those super connections and meet your heroes. A lot of you probably know who Joe Rogan is, and it's, he has had a lot of cool people Travis has had on his podcast, like Grant Cardone, and just so, Gary Vaynerchuk, like I said in the bio. Tim Ferriss is somebody that, he's worked alongside. I think it's pretty cool to connect with those kind of people. And when he started his podcast, he had no idea where that was going to take him. So it's really cool listening to his journey, and he gives us a lot of tips on how to build our network, how to connect. He talked about public speaking, and it's a great episode today with Travis Chappell. I am more than excited today to welcome Travis Chappell to the Sisterhood of Sweat.
Hey, how's it going, Linda? Thanks so much for having me.
Thanks. Where are you at? What neck of the woods do you live in?
Las Vegas.
Oh my gosh.
Yes. Yeah. So it's been pretty crazy around here.
What's the craziest thing you've experienced thus far during our Corona days?
Yeah, just the strip. There's the majority of the strip is closed at this point, so which is pretty unprecedented. It takes a lot for casinos to close their doors. You know what I mean? That's a pretty crazy thing. But yeah, Win and Encore announced it yesterday, I think, and then also MGM Resorts. And if you know anything about the strip, MGM Resorts owns about 50% of the casinos on the strip. So it's not just MGM, it's like MGM and New York and Mandalay Bay and Delano. Like basically the entire south end of the strip is completely closed, as well as Win and Encore. And I'm sure Caesars will be soon to follow, and Caesars Entertainment owns 30 or 40% of the strip themselves. So once MGM and Caesars are on the same page, and then Win and Encore have already done it, the whole strip will be shut down, which is pretty crazy for obviously the local economy, because there's a lot of Vegas locals that depend on the revenue coming in from the strip for their jobs and things. So yeah, it's crazy times.
Yeah, as we all are kind of waiting to see what's going to happen today, you know, I'm at my gym. I had one-on-one, and of course I worked out. I was like, I'm working out as long as
Yeah,
I
good for you.
can.
I wish I owned a gym because there's no way for me to work out like that right now.
Because all the gyms closed. I mean, all the churches closed. I guess I was driving home. I was gonna go get some shampoo, and I'm like, oh my gosh, the whole salon chain closed,
No way.
and
The whole chain.
the whole chain. And I was like, okay, they're closed. And then I drove by, the mall was closed. I was like, this is getting serious.
No kidding.
And my husband said the store was out of dog food. I'm like,
What? People
yeah,
stocking up on their dog food now, huh?
yeah. So I literally called my girls. I'm like, you guys got to order your essentials. You got to get all your essentials lined up because
For
everything
real.
is disappearing. So
It's going
what do
away.
we
Yeah.
do in a day and age like this? I mean, this is unprecedented. What are the suggestions? Because I know, like, we were thinking about our big dreams yesterday. Today, we're worried about survival. So, what kind of suggestions do you have for us, Travis?
Yeah, you know what? I'm no health expert or anything like that. My biggest thing is just to try to focus on the positives, and that's all I really try to do is look at the fact that, being forced to stay inside is something that it's almost something that we all want all the time, but then when it actually happens because of a national crisis, obviously it's not the way that we want it to happen. But it's kind of a cool thing to be able, like this morning I was able just to spend the first couple hours of my day with my son and my dog and my wife, and just drinking some coffee and like playing around, and like that kind of stuff doesn't happen very frequently when you have all the busyness of everything that is going on all the time. Like, all the travel that I had planned is all canceled. So, I'm not, there's 5 or 6 different trips within the next 5 or 6 weeks that I was taking that are no longer happening. And so, it just gives you the ability to do the thing, to spend time with people that you love, and to come up with creative ways to pass the time. And also, there's never been a better time to start in the online world than it is right now. Like, I think there's going to be two groups of people at the end of this. It's going to be a group of people that just wasted a bunch of time and were anxious the whole time. And then when it's all over, they're going to regret it because their life is going to start being busy again. And it's just going to be like, oh man, I wish I had free time like I did back then. But they're too anxious and worried right now to take advantage of the free time. So they just waste it by trying to get their mind off of things and watching Netflix all day instead of like doing things that are productive with their time. And so I think that'll be the first group. And the second group will be the people that did take advantage of the time that they had and sharpen skill sets, maybe started a podcast, use it as a time to read a book that's been sitting on their shelf for the past year, and continue to make themselves better. So I think there'll be two groups of people when this is all said and done, and would rather be in that second group than the first group.
Right. I think too, some people are shell shocked because it's happened all so fast. And I guess you can never prepare yourself enough for like something like this. But
Yeah.
there are certain steps you can take. And I think just first of all, don't freak out and don't panic, and focus on what you have right in front of you right now and
Hmm.
how can you utilize it.
Yeah. Yep. Exactly. Exactly. That's exactly right. And there's only so much that you can do. You know what I mean? And I think worry is just having faith that something bad is going to happen. So why not choose to just have faith that something good is going to happen?
Yeah, absolutely. And stay healthy. I mean, boost your immune system,
Yep.
take your vitamin C, get your zinc, drink your water. I mean, I think there's measures we can take. Taking care of your health right now is super important so
Hmm.
that your immune system is good. And
Right.
connecting like we're doing today, that is crucial right now. It's because I think some people feel like, especially the people that are home and can't leave, like they're in prison. I don't think you have to feel that way, but I think the connections that you make and keep, like right now, you could be connecting online with people, you could be going on Instagram or Facebook or doing a podcast or listening to a podcast to get your soul fed right now while we're all cooped up.
Yep, exactly. Exactly. There's so many ways to connect with people now. And, if you use it as an excuse to not connect with people, then that's on you, because there's plenty of ways to do it.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think I was just thinking today how thankful I was really for the internet.
For real though, for real.
Wow. And you have such a backstory. I want to do it justice today and just kind of talk about, you know, he has a podcast, Build Your Network, now a new one, World Class. But all of this started from way back when you were learning things as a child. So I'd love to hear some of your backstory today.
Sure. Yeah. So I was raised in Southern California in a city called Lancaster, which is basically kind of the armpit of California. It's not one of the cities that you think about when you're like, oh, California living has to be awesome. It's definitely not one of the cities that's high up on that list. But that's where I grew up. And there was a church there that is a really large independent fundamental Baptist church. So it's a very tight knit kind of community, and that's essentially where I grew up, where I spent all of my time as a kid, because we went to school on the same campus. It's like a 6,000 or 7,000 member church, so they had a K through 12 school and a college on the same campus. So I went to kindergarten all the way through college on the same exact campus, and then obviously every weekend we were there at church. And so it was definitely a unique way to grow up, especially in Southern California where we were. There is obviously it's kind of a strange place for a huge, insanely conservative type of a church to be located, but that's the situation that it was. And so growing up, I had never really thought I was going to be in business. I always thought I was going to be in ministry, which is what I went to college for. I double majored in college in Bible and church ministries, and that's what I was going to be doing when I got out. But basically decided right when I graduated that wasn't the path that I wanted to go down. And I was doing door-to-door sales in college just to make money while I was going to school. And so afterwards I was making pretty good money doing it. So I just figured, why not just go ahead and keep doing this? So I just kept doing door-to-door sales for a while, and then got burnt out and started into personal development and self-development and all that good stuff, and started listening to podcasts. And it was just like, man, I think I could start one of these. I think it'd be fun to start one. I think I could learn a lot. I think that it would be cool. So just started the show, and now it's been 2.5 or so years, and it's been incredibly life-changing.
Well, some of your story reminded me a little of my husband, because it sounded like you used to kind of wheel and deal even at a young age. You were
Oh yeah.
selling, and he's always kind of had a little bit of that. So
Yeah,
I admire
definitely.
that in a person, because I think it starts at a young age.
Yeah, I think, if you got the itch, you got the itch. You know what I mean? I can't really explain it. My wife and I were actually talking last night about it, like where that comes from. And I don't really know. Maybe I think it can be somewhat programmed in kids based on how they're raised, but also I think that some people, it's just kind of a natural desire. And so, yeah, I was the kid in elementary school that was bringing stuff to school to sell to the other kids. And then in high school, my buddy and I started our first business, which was basically landscaping. We mowed lawns and put in lawns, and we did all the labor as well. So that was my first kind of foray into the business world, was doing sod jobs and landscaping jobs for like house flippers, and then mowing lawns weekly for different accounts that we had. And obviously it wasn't like I'm not like some of these other people that had like prodigy level entrepreneurship in high school and were making millions of dollars. Like, we probably made, I don't know, like $10,000 in like the summer before our senior year. But that was, way more than anybody else was making. And it was also allowed us the free time that we wanted to be able to kind of like go, take some trips and go to the beach and do all the kid stuff too. And so that was kind of my first really entrance into the entrepreneurship world. But I really remember there was a time where I learned a big lesson doing that. And it was the fall semester of my senior year of high school. So we had just started the business that summer before, and we had landed 2 different jobs before the school started. But then school started. So, with schoolwork and going to school and homework and then football practice and all the other stuff, the extracurriculars, we just didn't have time to do the labor on the jobs. So I went and hired a few college students to do the labor for me. And I remember sitting in class one day, obviously not paying attention to what the teacher had to say. And I was doing the math on how much money I was going to make, even though I had been in school through the duration of the job. Like after school, I would basically drive from school to go check on the jobs and make sure they were going well, but that was basically it. And I remember doing the math and figuring out that I was going to make more money than the total combined labor that I was paying to do the work on the jobs. And that was a huge aha moment for me, because I started to realize where the value was in business, and started to realize that the value was more on the front end in creating the customer relationships. And that if I could create customers and I could bring that value, then I could hire somebody else to fulfill some of the stuff that I'm selling. So that was a really, really big lesson for me that I learned pretty early on from hands-on experience in that world. Yeah.
That's a great lesson. And I really think that a lot of us get stuck in that getting ready to get ready, and that you learn so much from taking messy action.
Mm-hmm.
Just like
Mm-hmm.
when you started your podcast, you just decided you're going to start a podcast, and you have a book, Meet Your Own Hero. You've met all your own heroes. And how does one, once they start podcasting, you feel like when you first start, oh gosh, how am I going to get this great guest on my show? How does
Mm-hmm.
one connect and build their network and meet their own hero?
Yeah, that's a good question. There's so much to it, but ultimately the biggest thing is credibility and authority. Relationships are all built on trust. And so when you can talk to somebody that has built trust with a ton of people over the last couple decades, like I would not have been able to do that work. Meaning, like, there's no way for me to just fast forward a couple decades of work, right? So
Right.
how do I kind of piggyback on some of that credibility and authority those people have worked up? And the answer was just to share stages with them, which ultimately the podcast was my own stage that I had created. And it gave me a platform to be able to share with people that were absolutely crushing it. And so the first few were really difficult. The first 10 to 20 were really difficult to get on. And it took me months at a time to book some of them. It took me a lot of creative reach out ways, a lot of different conversations with gatekeepers where they told me no, I was rejected. There's a lot of different things like that happen. But once you get one, it's a lot easier to get the second one. Once you have two, it's a lot easier to get the next two. Once you have four, it's a lot easier to get the next four. And so it just kind of starts compounding and building on itself. And then you look back now, and now I've been able to have conversations with dozens of the people that were on the top of my list that I wanted to connect with and bring on the show when I started. And it just started off with getting one. And sometimes to get that first one, because I did not have any connections to anybody that was ultra successful, like, really successful. Like I never met a millionaire in my life, let alone had a close personal relationship with one. Right. And so I at the beginning was just like, man, I just want to get around some of these people. And so I just paid to play. I hustled
Yes.
on doors and knocked on
Right.
some doors and sold some stuff, and my door-to-door career, and paid to play. I joined a mastermind with a guy named John Lee Dumas, who's a top podcaster in entrepreneurship space. And he was somebody that I had learned a lot from just from listening to his show. And so I wanted to meet him. I wanted to get to know him. I wanted to learn from him on how I could kind of do something similar to what he did. And so I paid to play. I joined a mastermind that he was putting on at his house. And that was like my first big name that I got to say yes to the show. And from there, it was a lot easier, like I said, to get name number two. And then from there, it was a lot easier. So it just became this thing that was piling up on each other. But the big thing is also to remember that you can't reach out to three people and then be done. You know what I mean? A lot of people, I think, are just like, well, ideally I want these three people on. And so they reach out to those three people and they get ignored, or they get told no. And it's just like, oh, well, this doesn't work. And it's just like, no, you're just going off of way too small of a test group. Like reach out to 100 people and then let me know the results, and see what happens after that. Reach out to 200 people and let me know the results after that. Like, do it. You can't do it in a bulk way. Like, you have to still reach out personally to each of them, but people just give up too quickly. Like they don't have enough results to even have a fair, assessment of the data because they haven't entered enough data. And for me, it was just about entering data and figuring out what works and learning from what didn't work, and just continuing to implement along the way.
And I really think that's where the power of positivity comes into play when you first start podcasting. It's just to realize it's a journey, and it is kind of a numbers game, like you said, like reaching out to 200 people. And
Yeah,
sometimes you're not ready for that big guest yet. Get some practice under your belt and some
exactly.
experience. And I can remember sometimes you would have somebody that you were really looking forward to, they canceled last minute. And what I did, instead of getting bummed about that, is I would just always flip it and think, okay, I can be better prepared for when they do come on. And I'm going to start looking for other guests and use this time, this hour
Exactly.
or whatever I set aside for the podcast. And I remember the very first time it was somebody canceled last minute, and I was new at it. And Tammy Lee Webb, Buns of Steel, she said, all right, I'll come on your podcast. And she came on like on the 4th of July. We
Awesome.
had
Yeah.
fireworks. It was great,
Yeah.
and
Right.
I just think like, when you get that first great guest, like you said, it really builds your confidence, but it also gives you momentum.
Yes, definitely. Yeah. And exactly what you just said is really crucial there, because I mean, that's one thing that I took away from my door-to-door sales career is learning how to deal with rejection and learning to fill up your pipeline with another person. You know what I mean? Like what you said, if you have somebody that cancels on you, the best way to feel better about it is to go book another huge guest. You know what I mean? So like the best way to cure those feelings of insufficiency and those feelings of like, oh man, this is going to take forever. This isn't enough. Like I'm not good enough to do this. The only way to cure that is to go get a yes from somebody else. So go get a yes from somebody else. Reach out to a few more people. Like be okay with the no's. Be okay that they're just a no for now until you reach a certain point. And that was always the way that I looked at it. It was like, well, I'll get them eventually. That was what I always tell myself is like, I'll get them eventually, cause someday my show
Yeah,
will be too big for them to be able to ignore it.
I
And
think
I'll get them on then.
you have to believe in your dream enough that you don't just take no for an answer. Like, I mean, yes, sometimes you have to take no, but
Yeah, sure.
for now, it's for now.
Exactly for now.
Yeah.
Yeah. But that's what comes along with like what you said, it comes along with the commitment that I'm going to be in this for the long haul, and people that don't have that commitment, they're the ones that are freaking out when somebody cancels on them or whatever. Like for me, I'm used to it at this point. Like I'm talking to probably like 6 or 7 people right now that I've been in communication with for longer than 6 months. And I just know that that's part of the process, and I'll get them eventually. Like I'll get them eventually. Like I'll follow up enough. I'll be persistent enough. Like I will get them eventually, because at some point they're just not going to be able to ignore me any longer. But
And
if you're not committed to the long haul, then you can't reach out with that level of confidence, because like you might quit in 3 months and you're not going to get them eventually. So like you have to have that commitment that I'm in this no matter what for the long haul, because it's a long build, and you got to be willing to stick with it if you want the results.
I love that. Well, at Podfest, I loved your talk. It was awesome.
Thank you so much.
How long did it take you to develop the confidence that you exude? Because I feel you're very confident when you took the stage, and you don't seem like you have any kind of nerves at all.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. So the way that I was raised has, I think everybody has pros and cons to the way that they're raised, and certainly that's how it was for me. And so I look back now on how I was raised, and there's some cons associated with that, but there's also some pros, and I try to focus on the positives more than the negatives, because I think everything's just a matter of perspective and mindset. But that being said, I was being raised that way. I was always doing some sort of public speaking, like from the time that I was a kid. Really, time I was like 12 years old was the first time that I ever got up in front of a group of people. It was preaching. I wrote a sermon and then preached the sermon. It was in that biblical, church context. Yeah, I went to preaching camp. That tells you a little bit about where I was back then. Went to preaching camp when I was 12 during the summer, and it was just a week of. It was basically a college homiletics course, which is like a how to preach course. It was a college course that they do in a week for high schoolers. So I took like a college course on preaching when I was 12. And from then on, you know, I don't know, a dozen times a year or so, I was up preaching in front of like a group of my, you know, fellow students. Or when I was 15, I preached in front of the whole church, which was, it was on a Wednesday night, so it wasn't the full congregation, but you know, there's probably 2,000 or 2,500 people in there when I was 15, and did preaching contests all throughout high school, and did a bunch of that in college. Was always speaking in front of people in college as well, and so yeah, I had that in terms of public speaking. There, I have a lot of just backlogged experience from the time that I was, you know, 12 years old, because of the way that I was raised, which I think really plays into how I take the stage now, even though it's, you know, completely separate context and completely different context. It certainly, I think, you know, plays into the confidence that I can bring to the stage sometimes.
Love that. I have a similar church background, and
Okay.
so I find myself now that I had a fear of public speaking because I had a bad experience on stage when I was
Gotcha.
and it was actually at a church Christmas play. But
Nice.
I literally think when I do solo rounds, sometimes I'm like, gosh, I feel like I'm preaching. But I think I think it
Exactly.
just comes from the fact that you've been raised that way, and I get so like excited and pumped up about stuff.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, you know, that was definitely a positive for me to take away from all of that, was very much, you know, being able to speak that often at that young of an age is not something that a lot of people can do.
I think it's huge because they say it's the number one fear is
Yeah, which is
public
crazy.
speaking.
Yeah, right. It's insane.
Well, you know, and that's a gift because you can reach so many people with your voice, and not to be taken for granted. And you're using it well. You're using it well.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Now, with your world class, let's talk about that a little bit. What is your new podcast all about, and what are you hoping to accomplish with it?
Yeah, so the new podcast is called World Class. It is basically me interviewing world class performers, no matter the field. So Build Your Network was very much like an entrepreneurship style podcast, talking to a lot of business leaders and business influencers, business owners, entrepreneurs, authors, and speakers, coaches within that space. Very, very much in that entrepreneurship, you know, category. World Class is something that I foresee being a lot more broad, that enables me to talk to a wide variety of people in a wide variety of industries, which is something that fires me up. I think the Build Your Network brand just kind of pigeonholes you to the business world, even though I think everybody networks no matter the industry. I just don't think that they look at themselves as being a networker. You know what I mean? Like they're just kind of like, oh yeah, that's my friend. And it's like, well, I mean, that's because you built your network, you know, but I think it kind of limited me in who I was able to have conversations with. And so World Class is kind of my passion project that allows me to connect with more people that are not necessarily just in the business world, but are maybe more in the entertainment space, or they're a comedian, or they're an athlete, or a journalist, or, you know, whatever it is. It just allows me to be able to talk to a wider variety of people.
What is how did you build your network? What are some ways people can build their network right now?
Number one way, hands down, by far, is having a podcast. That is the number one way. I'm blown away by how many people will say no to a 3-minute phone call, but will say yes to a 30-minute interview on a podcast. If you don't believe me, try it out. Like, start reaching out to people and ask them for 3 minutes of their time on a phone call, and then ask them to be on a podcast and see how many different responses that you get. That's easily the number one, like, ninja strategy or tactic, whatever you want to call it, is having a podcast. That's why I encourage everybody to have a show, because, like, even if you never get a ton of listeners, even if you never make a dime off of it, if it's just a networking tool, it's worth the time that you put into it, just to get to know and connect with other people that are in your space, your industry, that are, you know, crushing it and doing really well. Just doing that is worth having the show, hands down.
I'd love to hear a story about when you went to the mattresses to get a great guest. Like, do you have any good stories about really going to after a guest and really like working it?
Yeah, sure. There's one that I'm still working on right now, actually, but I actually have a confirmation that they're definitely going to come on. And it took me over 2.5 years to get that. So, yeah, I mean, that, I don't know if you're familiar with Jenna Kutcher at all, but, yeah, took me 2.5 years of reaching out to her and her team to be able to get something on the schedule. And right now, the only reason we don't have it confirmed is with all the Corona stuff going on, because for World Class, it's a YouTube show primarily, and then we put it in as a podcast as well. So we're doing all of those interviews in person, which obviously we can't do any of that right now. So that's really the only reason that we haven't been able to put on the schedule. But I have gotten like an official confirmation that like it's like she said, 100% it's going to happen. So that took me 2.5 years. There's probably 25, 30 emails in that email thread from the time that I initially reached out back in October of 2017 up till now, March of 2020. So, that was a lot of follow-up, being a lot of persistence, a lot of professionalism, a lot of continuing to build my show in the meantime. There's a lot of stuff that happened in that time period in order to finally be able to get a yes from her and her team.
Yeah, sounds like that you were like very consistent. I know like one of my first big guests that I had, that when I got the yes, it was Elaine Lane, Jack
Okay.
LaLanne's wife. And
Oh, awesome.
because fitness is my passion, I was kind of like, I think I got a little teary. I felt so honored that I was interviewing her.
Yeah, sure.
Who's somebody like that for you?
There's so many. I don't. Yeah, it's just there's so many. I mean, there's probably like 25 or 35 people that I can name. But I'll throw one off the top of my head. Tom Bilyeu was a really cool one for me, just because I respect the hell out of what he's been able to do, and him and Lisa have been able to create in their relationship, the way that their relationship works, in their businesses. Obviously, they've absolutely crushed that. There's no doubting that. But then now also with like impact theory and the huge goals that Tom has for that brand and what he wants to do in the future. Just so many amazing things there, and so much that I respect about him. So when I was able to get him on, I was really, really stoked to have the conversation.
I love that. I love his show, and I got to see him live at Powerful You. That was
Nice.
quite an experience, to have the interview on the stage instead of just watching it on the video.
Right. Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. He's the man. He was definitely one of the cool ones for me, for sure.
What are you hoping to create from all of this? Like, what is your biggest mission and your biggest why?
That's a really good question, because I don't know if I have a giant big picture vision worked out at the moment. I think that it's, kind of taking it. uh, So that being said, I do have like visions for what I want my life to look like, but I'm not one of those people that's just known from the beginning exactly what I want to do and how I'm going to get there. I just know like what I want to do right now, and then I take action on whatever that thing is going to be or is. And right now it's podcasting and being in this space. And so, in the future, I would like to be just a pure content creator. Right now, I'm more of like a marketer, more of a salesperson, more of a business person. And I'm building a business and building the show out and all that kind of stuff. I think in the future, what I would really like to do is just switch to just creating content and having conversations with people. I think that would be that my vision for myself and where I want to be, is being able to do that, and not having to worry about building the next program or building the next mastermind or the next coaching or the next this or that. Just being able to like sit on a microphone with a few people and have conversations and things like that. I think that's I think all of the work that I'm doing right now with all the shows that I create and everything that I produce right now is just preparing me to be able to get to that point someday. So, but like I said, I'm very much somebody that, I try to take stock of my goals and get clarity around where I want to be, very often, because the more you evolve and change as a person, the more your goals and dreams will continue to evolve as well. And if you don't take the time to revisit what those things are, then you could end up 5 years down the road having accomplished the goal that you wanted to accomplish 5 years ago, but you realize that it's no longer the goal that you wanted to accomplish. And so I try to be constantly taking stock of where I am and where I want to be.
Or you're chasing other people's dreams instead of your own, right?
Exactly. Exactly. Yep. Which is, I think the majority of people are in that boat right there.
Well, I think we can get easily distracted by, shiny things or
Yeah.
somebody else's success. And this is why it's so important to dial in on what your why is.
Yep. Yep. 100%. I agree.
when you're doing these masterminds, like you said something earlier that really clicked with me when you talked about getting in the room. And, I think a lot of us sometimes we're thinking about, oh, I can't afford that, or that's too much. But I think we've got to think more about it in a different way. Like, it's an investment, it's a value that you're putting in yourself. And when you put that much value in yourself, you expect that back out. It's just
Exactly.
this win-win.
Exactly. Anytime you invest in yourself, you're essentially just betting on yourself. You know what I mean? Like which is crazy to me how many people aren't willing to do it because they expect everybody else to bet on them, right? They expect their boss to give them a promotion. They expect their customers to pay them money. They expect their clients to bend over backwards for them. They expect everybody else to invest in them. Even like they expect mentors to invest time in them. They expect everybody to invest in them, but they're not even willing to invest in themselves. And it's just like, well, if you are not willing to bet on yourself, why would somebody else bet on you? Like you have to be the one to spearhead that, mission. And that's how I feel is every time I make an investment into myself, it's just a bet on myself. And it's just something that holds me accountable to continuing to improve and make myself better.
Yeah, because a lot of people are just sitting there wishing somebody would pick them, pick me, pick yourself, right? First of all,
Yeah.
invest that value in yourself. And don't you think that you have to step into that person that it is you want to be before you become it?
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah. You your mind has to be ahead of where you actually are. And then you become that person. Yeah. You have to be it until you become it. Is one of the ways that I've heard it said. And I like that a lot better than fake it till you make it. Cause I'm not on board with the fake it till you make it thing, but the be it till you become it. Like you have to adopt the mindsets, the habits, the actions of the person that you want to be. Because if you don't, then you'll continue being the person that you are. And you gotta take those first steps.
So it's just basically taking that leap.
Yeah. Yep. Exactly. And believing that it's possible for you, and not
Right,
just possible, but that it will happen.
right. I
Like I
think
said, you can choose to worry, or you can choose to have faith that it's not going to happen, or you can choose to have faith that it is going to happen. And why not choose to have faith that it is going to happen?
choose the faith and then find the evidence, like
Yeah.
instead of
Find the evidence that
confirming
you
your
need to
doubts,
support.
confirm your faith.
Yep. Exactly. Exactly. Which is so possible. The mind is so powerful. And your mind's always looking to confirm what you already believe. And so if you believe that you're going to be successful, your mind's going to look for evidence to support that belief.
And you talked a lot about perception at Podfest.
Mm-hmm.
Why is it so? Why is perception so key? Like building perception. Like if
Yeah.
I'm building a brand, why is it important for me to build perception with others?
Because perception is reality. Perception is not perception. So the way that somebody perceives you is their reality of who you are. And so your job is to kind of help control how people perceive you to be. Because if you can control how people perceive you to be, then you can control what reality is for the majority of people. And so positioning yourself and and playing into that perception is something that is not just recommended but necessary, which is the whole reason, again, to have a podcast, or at least a platform, a stage, a YouTube channel or social media or something that brings credibility and authority to you without you having to go build it for yourself and like brag about yourself all the time. Because nobody
Right.
likes the me monster, right? Like nobody likes the person that's like, oh, I'm amazing at this and I do this and I've done this and that. But like, if you position yourself properly, you don't have to say any of that, but people still perceive you to have that same
Mm-hmm.
level of authority without you having to say any of it, which then allows you to be a normal person and not talk about you and all your accomplishments, but you can actually turn that to help other people, which just makes you a more magnetic person anyway.
Well, don't you think, like, I do notice a lot of this on social media, the me monster.
Yeah,
Um, don't you think that if people were really truly adding value to the people around them and to their clients, that they wouldn't need to toot their own horn because the clients would do
exactly.
that? And that's better coming from them.
Exactly. The people that are always talking about how good they are usually
Mhm.
just don't have other people talking about how good they are. So they feel like they have to do it. right? If you're good, you're going to talk about it. If you're great, everybody else will talk about it. So
Oh, I
yes,
love that
100%.
one.
Yeah.
That's great. That's great. Really like that. So what have you learned so far from speaking? What how has that changed any part of your life?
Speaking, like public speaking, you're saying?
Like on a like on a stage to others, it changes you. I mean, I think it changes the dynamics of things.
Sure. Sure. Yeah. I think that it really gives you a lot of empathy. That's one thing. It gives you a lot of empathy for anybody that's willing to put themselves out there. Once you start putting yourself out there, you start having large reservation or large reserves of empathy that's built up for anybody that's willing to put themselves out there, And so you go from being like the heckler in the crowd that makes fun of everybody for trying and putting themselves out there to being the person that's like, man, I really hope this person succeeds. And that energy of, I really like the place that you have to be in to be like, man, I really hope this person succeeds, and you're thinking that about people all the time, is only going to help you be more successful anyway. Or you could be the heckler in the crowd that never tries anything and always lives a mediocre life and makes fun of everybody just because they're afraid to go chase their own dreams.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. And it's sort of like the whole flashlight. You're shining a light on what they're not doing, so then they
Right.
want to bring you down a little bit.
Exactly. 100%.
Now, what is like when you have spoke, what is like what is your favorite like keynote to give?
That was actually one of my bigger ones. I really enjoyed that keynote a lot. That's connecting in relationships is what I talk about all the time. And so it was when Chris asked me to speak on that topic, it was really easy for me to just like kind of own it and jump in. So that was a lot of fun for me, that one in particular, especially because it's with podcasters, and podcasters are just a cool group of people.
Yeah, and I truly I didn't know what to expect when I went into that room, but everybody nailed it that day. It was really good. I really enjoyed it. Um, from an audience perspective,
Mm-hmm.
what, like, if any, has anybody come up to you and just like, you've changed my life, or any success stories that you're proud of?
Yeah, sure. I'm blessed now at this point to have several, clients that would say similar sentiments to what you just said. And It sounds cheesy and it sounds like what everybody else says, but it's just true. Those are the things that keep you going.
Oh
When
yeah, for
when
sure.
there's negativity, and when you have that imposter syndrome creep in, or when there's a national emergency like what's happening right now,
Yes.
like the things that make you know that it's worth it are the people that had their lives directly affected by something that you have done or said or put out there. And there's just no better feeling than that. The money's great, don't get me wrong. I like money. but the impact there
Well,
is
it's a necessary
incredible.
item to live out your dreams.
Yeah, exactly. It really is. Yeah. But yeah, the impact, the legacy, the effect that you can have on people is it's astounding, and it's something that you shouldn't be taking for granted.
Oh my gosh, you know what? That's so true. I think it's a huge responsibility that is
Responsibility is a good
placed
word. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
on you, and not to take it for granted and not to take it lightly. When you are using your platform, I think it can truly be life changing, because my life was changed from the very first listen of a Lewis Howes podcast,
Hmm.
where he talked about what happened to him when he was a child. So I had a very similar thing happen to me, and I hadn't healed from it yet, and I was 55 years old. So
Hmm.
I think it's a responsibility not to be taken lightly. And what you said about money, I think money is an energy. It's like right now I see that energy of people reaching out and helping other people with their money,
Hmm.
and that just breeds more togetherness. Like, we're in this together, versus I want to hang on to everything just for me, just for myself, just for my
Yeah,
family, and I don't care about anybody else.
exactly. Yep. Couldn't agree more.
Wow, I've really enjoyed having you on the show today. And I just want to acknowledge you so much for being so sincere and down to earth, and coming on the podcast and sharing all your insight with everybody.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. I had a really great time. It was an awesome conversation.
Oh, thanks. Thanks. Where can everybody contact you on social media? And do you have any offerings where they could maybe get a slice of what you teach?
Sure.
Or
Sure. So on social, the one I spend the most time on is probably Instagram. So you can just follow me at Travis Chappell, Chappell. And then, yeah, if you want something for free, if you got some time right now, like everybody else does, and you want to just further your education, I do have a course that goes along with the book, and it's called Meet Your Hero course. It's totally free. You can take advantage of that at meetyourherocourse.com.
awesome, awesome. Thanks so much for coming on today. And thanks everybody for listening to the Sisterhood of Sweat.